Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast with me, your host, Scott Snyder. If you are new to the show, the Exit Is Now podcast is really all about taking the value acceleration methodology and doing what we started to call this year, living a more value acceleration centric lifestyle. Really, whether you're 25 years old, just starting your business, or maybe 65 years old, trying to more immediately harvest value in your company, we're teaching you about how to really make exit planning come alive in your business. And if you know me and you know me well, I'm kind of a product of value acceleration, if you will. I was joking with Alex at breakfast this morning. One of the books I'll probably write one day is Growing Up Through Value Acceleration. It's really the only way that I know how to run a company. And if you are new to the show, really the theme for all of this year is bringing people in like Alex and our other guests that have a direct impact on me and the folks here at EPI who have challenged us to think a little bit differently, or have, I think, great topics that business owners should know about that, frankly, I struggle with too. And I think Alex probably hits on all three of those. So Alex, a true, certainly entrepreneur, owns two different companies, is an EOS implementer, owns a company called ProfitWorks, right. Is an author almost 3 times with another book coming out shortly, I would assume. A fellow Ohioan, so came up from Columbus, Ohio. And if anybody is an EOS follower, as we are here at EPI, we kind of got reacquainted, if you will, while you were emceeing the EOS conference, and I thought you just hit Grand Slam. So welcome to the show, and thanks for hanging out with us today.
Appreciate it. Great to be here.
Yeah.
Appreciate the invitation, and happy to share with your audience.
We're going to dive into a lot of different topics. As I kind of alluded to, we can go from, we were actually laughing before he jumped on, and Alex said, look, if we get down on tangents, can you be the one that kind of reins us both back in? So we're going to see how the show goes. But
that's right.
I could say that I have a lot of respect for Alex as an entrepreneur, really kind of a lifelong entrepreneur, certainly as a teacher, an author, an EOS person, a people and culture person. So we're going to try to touch on all of that here in the show today. So kind of let's dive in. So I want to rewind, if you will, take a little bit of a time travel for me, because when I was telling you this morning in our show prep that one of the things that I thought was one of the coolest things that probably certainly hit near and dear to my heart was lifelong entrepreneur. My business was landscaping. You were selling T-shirts out of your locker. Right. Yeah. Take us all the way back to that and tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurship journey.
Yeah, it's great. I love talking about it because Scott, I didn't realize I was an entrepreneur. Probably, or maybe didn't acknowledge it until I was like 40. So
really,
my father had a huge influence on me with this. We sort of had an entrepreneurial household and very business minded.
Okay,
but I was somewhat of an artist in high school, so I was doing silk screening, I was doing watercolor and painting and things like this. But I developed this image of James Dean that was like a silhouette almost, and I got it on T-shirts, and the kids were like, "I want one." So they started selling them, and then for a senior project, I worked at it was called Fraternity Sportswear, but they would print stuff for college bookstores. And so I was in there, and as the final part of that project, I went through the process and printed like hundreds of James Dean T-shirts and went to these schools and had some buddies there that they would sell them. And so it was a great little experience. I didn't make any money at it. But there was one funny sort of incident. My father and I were down in somewhere in like Antigua or something like that. And I had the shirt on, and we were at this bar, and nobody else was there. And the bartender said, "Hey, where'd you get that T-shirt?" I said, "Well, I made it actually." And she goes, "I'll buy that from you." And I was like, "Well, I don't, it's the only T-shirt I have." My dad's like, "He'll sell it."
Really?
It was $20. And so I took my shirt off in the bar. Yeah. And she took it. So there's some other stories like that where I use the T-shirts for like cab money.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And so it was a fun, a little endeavor early on. But I never thought of myself, kind of as an entrepreneur. Didn't seem like there was a lot of risk there.
Well, you said then, so you get out of high school, maybe, and then you go to major in psychology. We were talking about that too. So did you still have the T-shirt thing, or were you kind of just now focused on school?
It kind of faded off in college, and I still did a lot of art stuff in college, but I didn't really have like an inspiration from an entrepreneur standpoint early on. It was 91 when I graduated. There was a recession. I was kind of bouncing around. I couldn't find anything. I didn't realize I was ADD at that point.
Yeah.
And floating around and trying to get into marketing, and psychology didn't really give me like a clear direction on what to go toward. Experimented with an acting career in LA and did some improvisational comedy. on stage, which is kind of interesting, the full circle as an EOS implementer being on stage. And but eventually found myself at a pretty large company, Cardinal Health in Columbus,
Right.
and just kind of getting my feet. My brother wrote a business plan about ProfitWorks, so inspired by my dad in Columbus. And Dad opened a bunch of doors to talk to these entrepreneurs.
And what was Dad doing? What was Dad an entrepreneur?
He was at this point he was. Okay. So he had started sort of a consulting, Freitag management and consulting. He would do strategic planning for these business owners. So he was on the advisory boards of these various small entrepreneurial companies. Like they would clean streets, or they built whatever types of landscaping and so forth. And so he would sit in these advisory board meetings and listen to these owners sort of say, my employees think I'm making tons of money, and it's not true. And so he said, maybe there's a business opportunity in there. So Gavin, my brother, and I left Cardinal safety and security of Cardinal Health and Paycheck, and took this leap. Yeah. And for 6 years, no compensation, we tried to grow this thing, and it was a training business primarily. But we got exposed to great game of business, Jack Stack, and we got exposed to ownership thinking. We got exposed to all these sort of different, very bleeding edge ways of sort of sharing information with employees and trying to get them to think and act like owners. Yeah. And so we developed a training program and tried to make it work. But I think it was a little frightening for owners to share a lot of information.
I know we were talking about that in kind of our pre-show conversations too, and I certainly want to dive into that. But I think that you kind of start hitting a wall a little bit, because owners tend to be. We experience the same thing in the specific exit planning space. We were talking it's like, don't tell anybody that I'm thinking about exiting, and we can get to that. But I think that similarly, you start to bang up against the wall because owners just are reluctant to kind of share.
That's right. That's exactly right. We did find a nice niche in sort of employee-owned companies. Okay. And that's where people literally are owners. It wasn't that they had to pay for it, but it's a nice retirement plan. And to get them to understand sort of the financial side of the business and help them sort of direct their behavior toward increasing profitability, which funds their own kind of retirement and grow the share price and that kind of thing. Yeah. It became a nice place to play where we weren't having 100%. To talk people into sharing financial information. So
when did you fall into EOS then? So from there, you become, and I would assume one of the originals, right? You're probably like almost 10.
I think there may be 50, 60 people at the time. Yeah, it was a small community.
But now you said they had, 700 something people?
Yeah, 7.
So I would say, we even call my dad one of the original SEPAs. He was certificate number 93. And now we have almost 5,000 SEPAs. So I think that's early. Really pioneering for somebody that has a company, and our audience certainly knows that, though we're not pure, and you're an EOS guy, so we could debate it a little bit. I always go to your conferences and I get a little bit of crap because they're like, ugh, Yeah. But nonetheless, I think that it had to be a little bit of a life changer for you when you fell into kind of EOS and started down that journey. You talked about that.
At that point, I was with Brad Hams at Ownership Thinking. Right. He's a fantastic visionary. Yeah. And he'd sort of pulled out of a great game of business and had his own kind of approach to it. And that's where we met Dennis and kind of a little bit EPI early years. One of my clients who's out of Minneapolis handed me Traction, and this was in probably 2011. He said, "This is the only book you need." And I was like, "Great." And I put it on my bedside table and I did not read it.
Didn't touch it.
But I read Get a Grip, which came out maybe shortly after that, maybe 11 or 12.
Part of the EOS library, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it was a fable. And I was like, this is awesome. And it's basically the life of an implementer. Alan is the implementer, and Peyton wrote it really, and Gino wrote it for potential implementers to see, this is what your life would be like. This is how you teach it purely.
Yeah, I always think that's a unique spin.
Yeah. And so it's pretty cool. And I had a glossary, I had highlighted dog-eared pages and all that. And then I went back and read Traction after I'd gone to boot camp. So I went to boot camp in 2013, and Gino was teaching it, which was awesome to hear right from the founder's brain, all this. And EOS is really, we say it's a guidebook. It's not a rule book. So there's 80-20 with our entrepreneurs, but this is what pure is. We know this works, and you have to somewhat adapt sometimes things to your own environment. But I decided just to pivot 100% and go, because there's a lot of phrases, but there's he who chases two rabbits catches neither. If you've heard of that. Yeah, so I had kind of this ownership thinking, this EOS thing, and I was like, I can't focus on anything if I'm doing both. So I ended up going all in on EOS, and it was just a game changer. Because when you focus, laser, you can just go so much further. So I'm approaching. I've told you this morning. 1,000 full day sessions, which is
big
great.
time, man.
Yeah,
that's
it's fun.
congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you, and I absolutely love it. And it's one of those things. It's like I can't believe people pay me to do this. And
Right.
so I did have a conversation with somebody who wasn't running an EOS, and I said, this is the kind of thing I would do even if I didn't get paid. He goes, let's talk about that.
Yeah,
I said,
right.
No,
Yeah,
I said,
let's
that's
do
a
that.
figure of speech,
Right.
But it is so much fun, and you have these leadership teams, these entrepreneurial leadership teams that are wanting to grow and maybe a little frustrated, and they read Traction and it like sings to them, and they decide we need to hire somebody to help us. And you can self-implement, you can hire an implementer. There's a thing called Basecamp. So
do you have like any understanding about, you guys have like 10,000 plus owners running on EOS these days or something?
20,000.
20,000?
Yeah, 20,000.
So, what is the breakdown between self-implementation and having a guy like you help me? I ask because the value acceleration methodology is similar, right? A lot
Right.
of commonalities between what Gino did and what my dad, Chris, has built.
Yeah.
But I would say when it comes to the exit planning piece
Mhm,
and perhaps even the EOS piece is that you have to almost have this third party, right? This like accountability
Yeah.
buddy. I think
Yeah.
value acceleration, this deep concentration of blending and aligning business, personal, and financial goals is hard to do.
Yeah, you're
on
kind of in
your
a vacuum.
own.
I
You're kind
tend
of
to
in a-
agree.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that third party objective neutral,
Right.
just fighting for the greater good of the company in there can observe the nonverbals. They can observe the team health side of it more
Right.
clearly. And sometimes often we're facilitating conversations that the team just really never would have had on their own.
That's
And
true.
so, because we're digging, we're
pulling different
poking,
things out.
we're
Yeah.
trying to figure out, like, well, why is that? And it's, well, the economy is not good. And so we can't sell. It's like, is it really the economy or is it a people
You're
issue?
challenging.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that piece is good. And we obviously, we encourage companies to graduate from the implementer. So the idea isn't we're there
true.
forever. It's a
Yeah.
2-year journey, 10 sessions, 2 years kind of thing. But some companies don't want to lose that objectivity in
Yes.
the room. So, because I've done it before with ProfitWorks, and Peter and I are running that on EOS.
Yeah.
I was usually facilitate the quarterlies, and it's like, the owner and the visionary, and it just sort of has a little, let's not talk
Yeah.
about that, Peter, but having an implementer in there facilitate us is like, oh shit, I got to stop.
Well, it's also interesting about what you're talking about right now. I want to pause and let the audience kind of dig in there because you're running EOS in your own company
Yes.
while also teaching it to other owners like yourself. It's got to be fulfilling work, honestly. It's got to be pretty cool.
I absolutely love it. I mean, I'm blessed, right? I'm doing what I love to do, and people say I'm good at it. So that's great. So,
Yeah. One of the other reasons I wanted to have you in too, is that you and I have like a unique kind of history, right? Where we kind of come together and then do our own thing and come together again. And there's a lot of similarities in story, both me and my dad, and then me and you being the young entrepreneurs. What you made me think about is their EOS conference stuff as well. And you kind of, once you found your way inside of EOS and you fell in love with it, you kind of dove all in. And so if anybody that's a Cleveland listener, or even maybe even a central to Northern Ohio listener, we started the Cleveland, Ohio, Northeast Ohio chapter of Exit Planning Institute in like 2011 or 12. And you were there for that. That's where I first met you.
Yeah.
And then I kind of got, again, reacquainted with you at the EOS conference where you were their MC. What I thought was interesting between you and my dad, Chris, is like him, he chaired the first ever and created the first ever EOS conference, which you were at with Ownership Thinking.
That's right. Yeah.
And that was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What I just think is interesting in your story about it when you at breakfast, where very similar to my dad, they were like, hey, let's bring this community of people together to drive relationships, best practices. And Peter Chrisman and Rich Jackham, the original owners and founders of EPI, were like, no, just keep it clean, keep it on brand. Chris and Scott, just go run with it. And Dad created the first conference, just like you.
That's right.
You kind of ran with EOS and said, let's create the first conference. So I think you were a hell of a lot more successful. How many people did you have at your first run?
First one was 325.
Yeah, we had like 80.
Yeah.
So, but just tell me about that experience.
Yeah.
And then, because the conference today is somebody that is a conference goer of the EOS. It's pretty impressive. I mean, you got 1,500, 2,000
really cool.
people going now. It's
we
pretty
call
significant.
it like Disney World for entrepreneurs.
It is.
And
100%.
everybody there. No, we're not really selling anything. We're trying to get the community together to connect with each other, learn from each other, and learn from these great teachers, mostly our EOS implementers who are teaching these breakout sessions, and strengthen their implementation of EOS. So connect, learn, and strengthen are the three uniques, of the conference. And my business partner and I had taken a hike up Mount Kilimanjaro in 2014, I think it's 14. And so on that, it's a hike up. It's, not super technical, but it's long and
absolutely,
and grueling. And it was great. We were talking about, let's get our clients together and let's do this. And so we put on our 3-year picture on our VTO. And then in 16, Tom and I were talking and we said, hey, if we're gonna do this in 17, we got to do it. So we booked the hotel, and that's the risk. We didn't.
You dove in, man.
Yeah, we didn't feel like it was risky, but it was. You get commit to the hotel,
food and beverage minimum,
exactly.
the hotel attrition,
the nights, the rooms, and
have you at the time? Did you hold any conferences? Did you have event management experience on that scale?
I had with Brad Hams at
That's
Ownership
true.
Thinking. We did 7 annual conferences, and they maxed out at maybe 150 people, but it was a pretty niche group. And these are companies who really believed in helping employees think and act like owners, and they wanted to share with each other. So it too was a conference where we had breakout speakers and keynotes and so forth, and that helped give us sort of a foundational model for doing a full day Thursday, half day Friday, because people like to split, early and closing keynote and that kind of thing. So that helped set us up for basic format. And then we had such a strong community and people who really get into EOS, you'll become real big fans of it. And there's a language to it, as GWC and IDS, and all these types of terms that language bonds people together, even in your business. And
same thing.
And you have shortcuts, right? And so linguistic shortcuts, I think that helps people feel like we're on the same page at the conference. And then when the speakers are using the same terminology, and so 325 first year, the next year Minneapolis has doubled, and then it went to about 1,000 in Atlanta, and in what was that, 19, and then we went virtual in 20. Houston, Orlando, and then Indy was just maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So big hit, honestly. It's really,
it's a lot of fun.
And I would recommend it to any of our listeners. For me, and I was telling you earlier this morning too, that I was at the time in 21 looking for a place where I could bring my executive leadership team and teach them what it's like to think more like an owner. So I saw what better place than this EOS conference, which is all kinds of different tracks, breakouts, other sessions, keynotes. There were really just a variety of business topics that fall inside of the EOS kind of realm.
Absolutely.
But nonetheless, everybody can kind of do their own thing. Then I was telling you, we laughed. I got a house in Margaritaville in Orlando.
Nice.
We came back to the house and we would kind of just have over a couple of happy hour cocktails. Yeah. What did you learn today? What did you learn today? So it became a really cool place for a relatively young leadership team here at EPI to kind of learn and grow together. But one of the things I think that you're probably most passionate about today, and what really struck me when I got reacquainted to you when I saw you again at the EOS conference, is the ProfitWorks stuff. I think that one of the things that I struggle in my own business with the most is, how do I teach my employees, whether it's the part-time office assistant all the way to my directors, how to have this more of an owner mindset. And I think it's important in the overall exit strategy of a business for those of you that are CEPAs that are listening, because what we do in that strategy is we really focus in on how to decentralize the business owner from their own business.
That's right.
And I think some of that comes from allowing employees to think more like you. I don't know how you possibly step up into that role and decentralize the owner if you're kind of not sharing a similar mindset. So can you just, when you hear developing this ownership mindset, what does that mean? What does that look like for you?
It's a great question, and probably it can remain a mystery. But the idea is essentially that if you think about what an owner thinks about, as an owner, you think about cash flow and risk and revenue growth and market share and competition and expenses control and finding people and hiring great people, all these kinds of things. And you think about what do employees think about day in, day out? And it's like, well, do I have a good job? Do I like where I work? Do I have opportunities to grow? Am I making good money? Think about Friday and so forth. And you have these two lists. And the truth is that if you look at the list on the right, that's really all about me. that employee list and me. And this is not about the owner, this is about the company. And so how do we get employees to think not only about me, but also about cash, risk, revenue growth, and market share and so forth? It's not to get them to be accountants or to run spreadsheets and that kind of thing, but to understand conceptually that, revenues minus expenses equals profit. And it's usually a lot smaller than they think it is. And so early on, we would survey employees of these businesses in Columbus, and the average guess that employees thought profit was, as a percentage of sales, was 30 to 50% average. And
I wish, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so you sort of think, well, what's the problem if you have people walking around thinking we make 50% profit? And the problem, there are a lot of problems with it, I think, or missed opportunities perhaps. But if people think we're making that much money, usually they're thinking, I want more money.
Yeah.
And so
I want more of that.
Yeah.
That's a lot to go around. Can't we share?
The irony is, like, once they realize it's 10%, not 50 or 7%, whatever, it's usually industry focused. They start to realize it's not that they want more money. They're like, well, how do we make it bigger? And what's in it for me if profit increases? What's in it for me?
Right.
And so we have to give them some context, like a simplified P&L, maybe understand the difference between cash and profit. And and I'm thinking about your dad's book and the idea of growing value of the business before. Right. And if you have a company of employees who think and act like owners, that's incredibly valuable. And that you've heard the phrase culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Exactly.
Right? And so the idea, if we can get everybody to start to, Brad Ham's called it, share the insomnia.
Right.
What keeps you awake at night? Maybe everybody should worry about that.
Yeah, maybe everybody should.
2 a.m. thoughts.
To better the overall organization.
And they see things, right? Everybody can see something in their line of sight that can be done better, whether it's like process improvement or reducing waste or inefficiencies or trying to curtail overtime or whatever it might be. And they start to make behavioral changes that shift the gross margin line. Mm-hmm. And that sort of leads to this idea of a self-funded incentive plan. And so the education is really almost more critical than the incentive plan, I think, because incentive plan is almost like a celebration. So
it's the award at the end of the year. But I do think that education is key. So I want to dive into the profit work stuff, people, culture, this incentive plan, because again, I can admit to the audience that me and Chris, my dad, are folks that want to decentralize ourselves and folks that like to share, or at least I hope that our people at EPI feel that same way that I do too.
Yeah.
But it's always the struggle as a smaller business owner. How do I share in the profits of the company? What's the right plan and incentive and bonus and whatever you want to call it? What does that look like? So we're going to talk about that in our next segment of the show. Just give us a quick couple of minutes and we'll be right back.
Walking to Destiny was written to arm business owners and their advisors with the knowledge and understanding needed to recognize their potential, execute growth tactics, and harvest the wealth locked inside a business. Originally written in 2016 by the creator of the Value Acceleration Methodology, Chris Snyder, Walking to Destiny 2.0 features a fresh and evolved look into the proven system to maximize value, grow income, and build a business that can be run without you, even if you never plan to leave. Discover how to align your business, personal, and financial goals. Distinguish between your business's attractiveness and readiness to transition. Measure the value of your intangible assets that likely contribute 80% of your company's value. Adopt a process to measure your results every 90 days. Walking to Destiny is the foundation for the Exit Planning Institute's Certified Exit Planning Advisor Credentialing Program. More than 5,000 advisors hold the CEPA designation, the world's leading exit planning credential. Grab your copy of Walking to Destiny 2.0 by visiting www.wtddownloads.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast, continuing the conversation with my guest, Alex, up from Columbus, Ohio. I want to dive more into what we were talking about right before the break, which is this owner mindset, and then how do we start to compensate our employees as they start to think more like that and get them kind of bought in and paid for that both. And I like what you talked about right before the break too. It's very similar to what we teach at EPI from the standpoint of we're trying to have not just the business owner, but their employees think not in terms of just income, but also think in terms of value. I always describe that conversation as if you go out to the board or the KPIs or wherever you house that. For us at EPI, I point out this window because there's a big bullpen outside the studio where we have our big company-wide meetings. And if you look at that board, a lot of the times, I think most of the times, as a guy that goes in and works with a lot of owners, the metrics on those boards are maybe efficiency, maybe employee or customer satisfaction,
Yeah.
a lot of leads, how many leads, how much
Funnel,
revenue did I
pipeline
drive,
stuff.
right?
Yeah, right.
But how many times you walk in and look at the owner's dashboard and it says, how much value did I create today?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
minimal, right? And so I think that whether it's the employer or the owner, in our world, we would say they're thinking too much in terms of just income generation and not value creation.
Yeah.
Before we kind of dive down that path, though, one of the hottest topics that I see in our community today is this talk around the next generation of employees. And when I think of you and I think of ProfitWorks and I think of this ownership mentality, I think the next generation, people in their 50s, 40s, 30s, 20s, are super entrepreneurial and they like naturally want to do this. And I say that because what we found at EPI is that our people really look for two things in their roles. One, they want to know the goal and objectives. They say, Scott, okay, it's to design this content, it's to develop this business, it's to host this conference.
Right.
And if they have a clear vision and goal, they want to say, Scott, back off and let me do it my way, whether that's working 4 days a week or 5 days a week, whether it's working 12 hours or 5 hours a day, whether it's in the office or out of the office. They want to have a independence in their role.
Right.
And then they really want purposeful, meaningful work, whether that's knowing that the work that they're doing internally at EPI is meaningful to the organization, but also meaningful to the end user, the client, the SEPA, the advisor out in the community. I think it's much like what you're talking about in your book, where it's talking about, again, this people culture, this ownership mindset. And do you think that the next generation is more receptive, I guess, to something like ProfitWorks and ownership thinking than maybe generations before them?
I do. And what you reminded me of is a Dan Pink book called Drive. And he does talk about incentives in there.
Great book.
But he focuses on autonomy, mastery, and purpose, those three things. And we talk about independence and autonomy and working from wherever. And then you incorporate scorecards like with an EOS where you can measure. It doesn't matter what time it got done. If it was between 9 and 5, it's just that the data is moving in the right direction.
Exactly.
You've got a bit of autonomy along with verifying and trusting.
Right.
The mastery is about career path and about getting better and moving up in the organization and becoming really effective at what you're doing. And so being able to incorporate retention strategies and growth strategies where people understand their career path or potential paths, options that they might have. And that sense of purpose you talk about is really tied in, I think, about the VTO and impact, and whether it's a for-profit organization that's trying to help 100,000 companies run on EOS or another organization that might be not-for-profit that's trying to impact lives of folks. There's that sense of a bigger meaning to what we're doing than just making money. Now we have to, no margin, no growth, of course. So we have to take care of the farm, I guess, to make sure that we can invest in the future. We can provide return on investment to the folks taking all the risk. And so we do, like when you talk about helping employees understand some of the uses of profit, like in the book, we talk about profit is a tension. There's a natural tension there because we need to make enough profit to sort of take care of the business and take care of the risk takers and invest for the future and perhaps share a little bit with the employees in this self-funded plan. But then also, we've got to be competitive in the marketplace. And so there's that natural tension there. And so I think what I've found with generational people can understand this stuff. And we were talking about this earlier. We don't get taught this in schools. You're not teaching business 101 or whatever. So we got to take a little bite at a time, the piece of the elephant at the time. And, usually I start with just the income statement because balance sheets kind of gets pretty complicated.
Yeah, it gets complicated quick, right?
Yeah. And sometimes we assume just because you're on a leadership team, you must know how profit works, right? And gross profit and what's gross about it. And
Exactly right.
So it's in different companies have kind of different line items, but trying to simplify that into one, simple formula and then help people understand that if $1 comes in, maybe there's a dime at the bottom, and those 90 cents of expenses, perhaps you start to get into some gross margin conversations or just talk about how we can get that 10 cents to 11 or 12, and they are actively contributing ideas. They see things like we said earlier. And so we're starting to get the light bulb brighter and contribute more. And I think there's that sense of contributing that's really important. We were talking about Maslow's hierarchy earlier, of being collaborative and being respected, to say, I know you can understand this. And the other thing, Scott, I've seen is that you can't do it once and then everybody's going to get it.
Yeah, right.
And so it has to become a way of doing business.
Yeah, it's built in.
Yeah. And so I ask a lot of my clients who are running an EOS that don't try not to have two VTOs, like one that has numbers on it and one that's like cleaned up and just has like sales on it or something. Because if people say, well, I don't understand what gross margin is, but what an opportunity to explain it. Well, this, after we subtract our
well, what I'm sensing here is, and we've talked about this in depth, that it's all really about education first.
Yeah.
So that's probably why when your like acting career and your personality, it fits probably really well into your business today.
Yeah.
Because it seems like you're a guy that really loves working with people and educating, right? You're you got that MC teacher. Entertainment teacher kind of mentality too. But talk to me about that, right? I think that it sounds like the first step in how do owners start to decentralize themselves by helping their employees think more like them.
Yeah.
It's an education process.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's what, when you teach people this stuff and then they start to, they grab it and they use it and they improve operations and they drive, profitable sales, and they're, they've got scorecards, you've got tools that you've put in place. I call them attention tools that help them monitor their progress and celebrate the victories. And if there's trends that are off track, you can put on the issues list and attack it. You've got this group of folks who are starting to take more off your plate as an owner, so that you are decentralizing, you're freeing them up, and they can make more autonomous decisions in the field because they know, this is going to positively affect our gross margin.
How long does that process take?
It's a journey. So it depends on where you're starting. But if you've never shared anything, it's going to obviously be a bit longer. And I suggest just start to teach that and maybe do it quarterly. Okay. And in EOS, we always say people have to hear something 7 times for them to hear it for the first time. Meaning it's like marketing. You want to get buy-in, and the opposite of buying is selling. So you have to set it up so that you're helping them buy into it, buy into the vision, buy into the core target, buy into the marketing strategy and the 3-year picture. And so the repetition, and within your state of the company meetings, which perhaps are quarterly, you're doing that. So it could take 2 years to start to really have people going, I know what the core values are, I know what gross margin is. And you can do little games. A lot of teams have set up gamification of like rocks and things like that. Yeah. Do not put an incentive plan on a rock. Let me just say that.
Yeah, get that everybody out there right now.
But we tend to, and we can venture into the incentive plan side of this a bit if you like. But
I do.
But once you get the minds kind of open to realize the company's not holding back, not keeping all their cards to the chest. This is how it works. It's tight. It is. Some industries are 2%. And boy, you screw something up, it's like, and so those conversations are really helpful. I think there's a vulnerability that's displayed by ownership when they do share information. They're saying, hey, this is not perfect, and I know, we need your help. There's like, it's saying we're in this together. It's a company of we. It's one company, one vision, one team, one VTO, not a bunch of pockets of excellence. And so
I think it there's this kind of transition point, I would assume, in your process too, where now the employees are educated so they can raise their hand and say, hey, I know what gross margin is, and I know why that decision that we're about to make will affect that. But then there's got to be this kind of really cool like spark that goes, not only do I know it, but now I believe in it. It's the way I operate, like me and you would operate in our business. It's to your point, I care about our people. I care about our customers. I care about profit margins. And when you're making all these decisions every single day in your life, you're thinking about the whole unit. Right. So there's a difference to me in between knowing it and saying, yes, I can tell you that definition. And then I'm the office manager and I'm saying, not only do I know, but I actually care. Yeah. Right. There's got to be a big spark there.
It is. And the cool thing is when the educated workforce begins to shift a little bit and they're challenging each other in positive ways, we talk about a tension curve, but they're really creating a bit more a healthy conflict. If you use Patrick Lencioni's phrase, they inevitably the company's going to see increases in profitability, and that's when the bottom line's growing, and therefore you can really look at what we call a self-funded incentive plan, right? And that'll help the employees kind of share in that upside of their changed behavior. And we define an effective incentive plan is one that really manages or directs that human energy, like all those arrows pointing in the same direction, toward improving the financial performance of the company. And so the incentive plan can be a reward, a celebration, and you know, there's a lot of research on how much to pay people and how often to pay people might depend on your culture. There's not, we say in the book, there's not one silver bullet on this stuff, but typically I'm targeting the bottom line before tax. And we suggest not using terms like EBITDA and those kind of things, because, but whatever you call it, called profit before tax, you know, that profit still has work to do. It's got to provide a return on investment for the owners. It's got to pay taxes. We're talking about like 40-50% of that's gone already. Because if they see $2 million down there, well, that's not really there. It's not sitting somewhere. And we've got to reinvest. We might need to buy new equipment for next year, or computers or software or ERP and all that stuff. And then if you have a line of credit or some debt, we want to retire, because that's an expense with interest that will help increase our profitability. So there's all kinds of ways to draw people into that. But the bottom line, typically we help the business owner establish a trigger or a threshold, a minimum threshold of profit that helps the company cover those obligations. And then X% of anything above that trigger goes into the pool. And so the X is like, sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 40% of anything incremental. So we're trying to self-fund the plan, keep it really simple. And then we got to support it, meaning repeat the education. So those are the big,
so you get back to the educational part then too.
Yeah. And we have an online, we were talking about these days, people like to do self-paced education. So we have like a master class where you can watch, you know, video, or somebody on the leadership team can watch a video and then teach it to their teams.
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. But let's go back. I think that you were talking about that $2 million bottom line, right?
Yeah, right.
To get there, though, you taught me this right before we came in. You had that cool bell curve that you were talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And we talked about owner transparency. And it hit home for me first, because in exit planning, we hear all the time, literally next week we have a SEPA program going on. Yeah. One of the questions that we'll take from our advisors going through it is, well, what should I be telling my owner about sharing their exit strategy? Yeah. And I'm probably pretty extreme on this. I say share it and share it all.
Right.
Because I think that it just creates a very authentic culture.
I agree.
I think most, knowledgeable and bought-in employees know that the company's going to transition at some time.
Yeah.
And that there's maybe some milestones along the way.
That's right.
And so what are those? But I think that whether it's exit planning or incentive plans or profitability, ownership thinking and mindset.
Yeah.
What I liked what you were talking about before we jumped on the show was it really starts with being transparent.
Yeah.
To some extent, though.
Right.
So at the other end of that spectrum was like radically transparent. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. It was kind of an aha for me. So Yerkes Dodson is the name of and you can Wikipedia it or whatever. These two guys in 1908 sort of discovered a natural law. They didn't invent it. It just exists like gravity does, but it's basically a relationship between tension and performance. And so if there's no tension, in the bottom left corner of this graph, there's not much asked of people in an organization. There's no scorecards. There's no real expectations. And at the same point with transparency, you're really not sharing anything with people. It's closed book.
Sure.
And so as you move up to the right on the horizontal axis to like the middle of it, we call it open book, the curve goes up to a bell curve to the top and higher levels of performance. And because people are challenging, why do we do it this way? And Gino calls it the ham. Why do we cut the ham off? And so they're having healthy conflict. They're radically candid with each other. They are really shooting for the big one kind of thing. And on the right side of that curve, we call fear. So it goes entitlement, earning, and fear of the three zones, earning being at the top of the bell curve. And the fear, radical transparency perhaps, is if we share way too much information about salaries, or I have seen a few companies that do that, it doesn't get you what we're trying to do.
It's not a net gain.
Yeah. So it doesn't, it's too much. And you can cause people to kind of start to think, self-preservation. They're thinking about fight, flight, freeze, kind of thing. And we want to pull them back into the middle of that bell curve. So a little bit of tension there. So more asked of people. Core values are a great example of higher expectation of performance. We want people to come in here and live and breathe these core values and treat each other with respect and so forth. So transparency with open book tends to have higher levels of performance, because you're saying, I'm sharing this information so you can make better decisions, around decentralization or around your area in the organization. And so you need to have some good information, good, accurate, timely data. And so scorecards, measurables, VTO information. We need to provide inspiration, even a 10-year target that's like we want to be $50 million or whatever in 10 years
right.
is a bit of tension. It's like, it's this pull to the future, and we don't know the path necessarily we'll take there, but let's shoot for it. And so we got to share some information so that they can help us, carry the load. And it should create more freedom for the entrepreneur, for the owner, because they're able to unburden from some of this stuff that they're waking up at 3 a.m. about. So it really becomes
I think that I'm writing down the word freedom, because what was on my mind as I hear you talk through that is that for an owner that has been doing things away for 25 years and has a very successful company, right? Makes good money.
Yeah.
And now is saying, look, I think the companies of the future need to be very decentralized from the owner, and our employees need to be empowered to think more like owners.
Yeah.
But now you're telling me that I got to share a little bit more of my profits, and then I got to tell people more about my numbers. Like, I think it just goes back to talk about just the old sayings, like change is hard.
Yeah. It is.
But I just think, talk about tension too.
Yeah.
When you get into a company like that, like, how do you coach the owner to say you got to let go a little bit, and we got to start sharing that? That's got to be a little bit difficult.
Yeah. One of my mentors suggested I use this phrase: is, what are you afraid of when you're thinking about sharing information? What are you afraid of, literally? And then to shut up. Generally, they'll say, well, they're going to want more money if I share information. Say, okay, what else? What else are you afraid of? Well, if I share bad news, they'll run for the doors, right? Or if I share good news, they're going to think I'm making all this money. Well, they already think you're making all this money, right?
Yeah, well, first, they probably are.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you have consequences either way. If you don't share any information, the consequences, you got to deal with whatever stories they're making up in their head, and you got to live with that. And so why not share a little bit of information? I'm not saying everything, but share that'll help them do their job better. And then you are putting the story into their head, and they start to think about. So one of the ways that we teach it is in order to help people understand business finance, perhaps related to something they are more comfortable with, low risk, like personal finance, because everybody's trying to put food on the table and so forth. So you can kind of do, and I saw this at the National Center for Employee Ownership Conference. I was at a couple of weeks ago. And they had a neat sort of example of a personal financial statement as an income statement. And then you just kind of relate that to, for the employees into the business. And it helps them sort of dip a toe in and start to see, this is the way capitalism works, So they start to realize, and Gino talks about this too, that there's every decision we make is either one out of love or out of fear. And so the more we make decisions out of fear, we're just losing so many opportunities. And so love is, and I use that big L word, but it's about service. It's about respect. It's about helping, and it helps people start to realize there's nothing sinister going on here. We're trying to impact lives, and
we're all trying
make
to be
a little
better.
Money. Yeah. And so the incentive plan itself. I wrote the book about that primarily because it is a hook. It's a frustration, and I wanted to share what I'd seen mistakes and best practices in there. And you can certainly read the book and self-implement. You can read the book and hire somebody to help you, a coach, to kind of be your guide on the end. And then, but you really have to commit to that education piece.
Yeah, I agree. Education, transparency, some of the kind of the key things that I'm taking out of our conversation. So I actually want to dive into the book next.
Sure.
But I'm going to take a quick break, and we'll be back. And I want to talk about Alex's book and talk about the inspiration for the third book, I think, that's coming out.
It's happening
very soon. So give us a quick sec. We'll be right back.
Get ready to uncover innovative solutions, build deeper relationships, and share transformational experiences at the Exit Planning Summit this May in Scottsdale, Arizona. The summit is the world's largest exit planning-centric event, bringing together professional advisors and their teams from around the globe. It is the premier conference for people committed to working with business owners, accelerating business value, aligning personal and financial strategies for the business owners, and collaborating with the top professionals in the market today. The transformative experience does not stop when the sessions end. Immerse yourself in a distinctive lifestyle experience that transcends expectation. Join us at the magnificent Five Diamond Resort, the Phoenician, the premier luxury hotel in Scottsdale. Immerse yourself in breathtaking views, impeccable service, and unparalleled amenities. Curate a distinctive resort experience infused with a retreat-like ambiance that transforms your well-being. Learn more and reserve your spot now at www.exitplanningsummit.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Exit is Now podcast. So we've been talking about all kinds of stuff, and we were laughing during the break. We kept ourselves on time and hopefully not down to too many tangents, but we've heard all the way from entrepreneurship journeys to EOS to profit sharing to incentive plans, owner mindset. A lot of that is in Alex's book, Profit Works, which, again, after I saw you at the EOS conference, we certainly bought copies. Me and Jocelyn, our operations manager, read it because, admittedly, though I think that a lot of us do embrace an ownership mindset, it's now how do I create the right incentive plan to do that. So what was the, you wrote this during like our big pandemic. What was like the inspiration behind book number 2, Profit Works?
Yeah, that's great. Well, when we first, I'll go back just a little bit. When we first joined EOS and became implementers, Tom and I had been in ownership thinking, and so we were doing the EOS journey, and COVID hits. And one of the things we absolutely realized that we didn't have prior to EOS was EOS. We didn't have a vision. We didn't have alignment around the leadership team or the entire company around a vision or core values or that kind of stuff. The people management side of it. And what we'd seen with our prior experience with incentive plans and with profit education was that oftentimes companies would want to implement that without doing the hard work around people, people analyzer, the core values, the bar, and so forth. And so we realized that had to come first. And so we wanted to get that into a book. And so there is a little chapter on EOS in there, but just trying to sort of set the stage. But when you're running on EOS and you're maybe a year, 2 years in, that kind of thing, and you have really good people, it's going to be natural to want to start to bring them in and enroll them in that VTO more specifically, more tightly, so that when you're doing your state of the company meetings, they're really getting connection.
You do have to tie it all together. Yeah, absolutely.
So the incentive plan piece, and some companies do the education piece first, like you were saying, and start to just to set the stage so that people understand what they're looking at there. And so the profit education and the incentive plan became these other 2 components of the ProfitWorks, we call ProfitWorks solution. Okay. And so I wanted to get that into a book, and so we had lots more time. We were isolated and just pounding at the keys. We took these clarity trips every year, and we would write.
Yeah, that's super cool too.
We went to New Zealand and wrote a bunch of the book. It was in right before COVID, actually. And so we got it, but we got it all out and wanted to, because we'd seen it come up in our sessions, our EOS sessions so much, where it's a mystery. Like, how do you design this thing?
Exactly right.
And so we wanted to coach people about, number one, keep it simple, keep it super simple, and don't overthink it. Don't try to create silos, and don't make it discretionary. And then number 2, you got to support it like with that ongoing piece. So we wanted to get it a simple book. It's about a 2.5 hour read. And unless you had listened to Audible, and it's like, can be 1.5
sped up.
Yeah. Right. And, but I read it, and it helps the company, the entrepreneur that's running on EOS, start to see maybe a path toward that, to keep it simple. And there are a lot of different suggestions in there on how frequently do you want to pay it out. And so we want to put like stories in there, and there's not right or wrong. It's kind of like what's right for you. And, frequency and payout, and then protecting the company, not paying out everything every quarter. So there's lots of ideas in there around how to think about that. And then how to set your trigger or your threshold to protect the company, number one, the we, and then teach folks how to find the money to be active participants in funding it. So that was the inspiration for it, was to simplify the process for our crazy entrepreneurs. We love it. We're them. But make it accessible, and then also make it aligned with an operating system that a lot of people are familiar with, so that it.
So talk to me about the third book.
Oh, the third book. All right. So I'm maybe halfway through. It's a fable. It's a business fable, and it's a ProfitWorks fable. So it's a fictitious company. Kind of they've implemented EOS, and they're now at a point where they really are feeling like there's some entitlement mentality in the organization around bonuses and end of year. Like, when are we getting the bonuses? Right. And it's like, whoa, no, we got to earn the bonuses. So we're trying to get them up that bell curve to the earning mentality. So I'm kind of working my way through the story. I have the characters, and walk the company through the process where it starts with entitlement mentality, and then the guide helps them sort of fight their way through the profit education, the design of the plan, and then the rollout. The launch of it's really important, so that it's set in the right way in people's minds that this is at risk. It's not a sure thing, and it's possible to get to the end of the year there's no payout, and maybe we'll do something else. But we have this formula now, so that's what I want to get across there. So I've booked Airbnb where I'm going to be solo in the woods, right away at this thing. thing.
Yeah, you're a big
in
hiker
about-
too, aren't you?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah,
Enjoy
yeah.
that.
If you look, if everybody can get a copy of ProfitWorks, you go online and grab it. You'll see this little the blurb down here at the bottom
That's right.
about you and Tom, right? You and Tom.
Yeah, that's right.
You and Tom hiking. So I
Yeah.
think these clarity trips, I was laughing with you too, that if you guys don't know, Alex takes like 156 days away.
That's right. 156 free days, we call them in Strategic Coach. I'm a member of that as well. And
Yeah, see,
try
so
to-
I got to
try
get
to
on that level. I was
disconnect.
laughing
Yeah.
with you
Yeah.
at breakfast this morning because I was like, I was going to do the Gino Wickman, take the month of August off.
Oh, yeah, the sabbatical.
And then I had to split it into 2 chunks. So it's
That's all right.
20 business days.
That's
just
good.
just a week and a half in 2
Yeah.
different seasons.
Hey,
But it's something, right?
Baby
It's a
steps.
step, baby
right,
steps.
Yeah, there you
Well,
go.
Alex, thanks for
Yeah.
coming on the show, man. I really
Thank you,
appreciate
Scott.
it.
I really
I would
appreciate
encourage you guys to look at ProfitWorks. I think it's super interesting stuff. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks where you can get our podcast on all of your podcast platforms. We're laughing because
platform.
I always mess this part up for our listeners. Anywhere you get a podcast, you can listen to us. We'll see you back soon, guys. Thanks.